Quick disclaimer before this video, nothing in this video is conjecture or hypothetical. This investigation is a statement of provable facts and no connections, allegations, or statements should be taken as slander or misinformation, as it is all provable with simple research. Now, I'd like to start by noting that I'm not the first to expose this, but I'm going to put all of the information that I've gathered in a digestible format and include a decent amount of my own research to connect a lot of dots here. Free Beacon, Influence Watch, and Capital Research have all done extensive amounts of research on this dark money network, and all the sources that I used, including those investigative groups, are linked down below. Now, there's a lot of places that I could start here. While plenty has been published on Arabella advisors, very few people actually know them by name, and even fewer know what they do. This is partially because they do such a great job of staying out of the spotlight. In fact, The Atlantic called Arabella's network the massive progressive dark money group you've never heard of. Now, Arabella Advisors is a DC-based philanthropy consulting company that caters to major left-wing organizations. And if that sounds like a mouthful, put simply, they're a major far-left impact investment company. Their focus is on not only swaying politics, but also swaying the culture. And as we know, politics is downstream from culture, so that's where a lot of their money goes. They were founded in 2005 by Eric Kessler, a Clinton administration alum and longtime staffer at the League of Conservation Voters. He's also an alum of the National Democratic Institute. Kessler remains a senior managing partner and principal at the firm. And in response to Trump's election in 2016, he called on donors to increase their donations to left-wing environmental groups and government-funded healthcare groups. And after 2016, they were not ready for 2020 to be a repeat. In 2020, Arabella's nonprofits had total revenue that exceeded $1.67 billion, with total expenditures of $1.26 billion, with nearly $900 million paid out in the form of grants to politically active left-wing nonprofit groups. But don't be fooled here, okay? Arabella doesn't seem to be focused on making money. In fact, they've advised their clients to take money out of safer investments and instead put their money into risky experimental companies. They've also called on their investors to boycott the right-leaning U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They've called on their investors to enact a ballot initiative that freed 4,000 criminals, and they've called on their investors to lobby for a labor union-friendly policy in Oregon. Specifically, the ballot initiative that freed 4,000 criminals was California Prop 47. This is what decriminalized theft under $950, and we can see as a result there was a rise of 9% in larceny thefts, particularly from motor vehicles. And this assessment is consistent with what police chiefs across the state had seen since 2014. As you can see, Prop 47 passed by a fairly large margin. Prop 47 is also where we get wonderful videos like this from. Now, why are the groups in Arabella's network considered dark money? Well, in April 2019, the New York Times posted an article criticizing Arabella's political financing system because it obscured the identity of their donors. Even Arabella themselves is fairly obscure because Arabella Advisors LLC is owned by Jennifer Stearns, who's a major Democrat donor, and she also owns other left-wing political investment companies. But then there's Arabella Acquisition LLC, whose owner remains unknown. And not only are donors well hid, but Arabella also has several sub-companies, which I'll be getting into here shortly. And on the legal side, one of Arabella's lawyers seeking to keep their true character out of the public eye is Mark Elias. Mark Elias is someone that I've talked about extensively on the channel back when the FBI Trump Spygate scandal was being revealed through FBI emails. Mark Elias was a Perkins Coie lawyer who was the general counsel for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and John Kerry in 2004. Mark Elias more famously, or infamously, is the man who took roughly $160,000 from the Clinton campaign and the DNC to pay Christopher Steele for the slanderous and fraudulent Trump dossier. And while Arabella might claim to be nonpartisan, their track record tells a very different story. In all my research, I managed to make a list of the causes that Arabella provides monetary support for, both politically and culturally. To pick out some big ones here, you can see carbon reduction mandates that would crush industry, looser sentencing laws, as we've already covered, abortion activism, global redistribution, whatever that is, mail-in voting, court packing, trans issues, and more that we'll cover here shortly. Major contributors that are actually identified are Warren Buffett and David and Lucille Packard. They've also received massive donations from the foreign-funded Weiss Foundation, along with their advocacy wing called the Burger Action Fund. Weiss has paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to Burger since Burger's creation in 2007, and between 2010 and 2017, Burger donated $12.4 million to one of Arabella's sub-companies, the 1630 Fund. And in that same time period, 2010 to 2017, they donated $1.29 million to another sub-company called the New Venture Fund. So before jumping into the first major scandal, I'd like to take a minute to share with you what's been going on here behind the scenes. As you can probably tell, I've taken some time off. Got married, moved 3,000 miles across the country, got a job that pays the bills, and now I'm back. New life, new goals, new era of deep investigations that beckon back to the earliest days. And with that has come a new drive for the hardest hitting content to keep you in the know and to connect with each one of you personally. That's why our Patreon service has returned with new tiers, new ways to support our efforts, and new ways to connect. And if you can't support us, but you'd like to be a part of our community, you can join for free and stay up to date on everything going on. But for those who can support our mission, we have tons of perks from pen pals to investigation notes to live streaming, Q&As, and more. So head over there and check it all out if you're interested. I figured if we're going to revamp everything, then let's do it the right way, because this is certainly the right time. Thank you. As you can probably guess, 2020 was a big year for political activists. But the real battle is not so much in federal elections as it is in the local elections. And the redistricting process by state legislatures can turn certain voting districts red or blue. One of the primary pieces of information that they use for this redistricting is U.S. Census data, which brings us to the first major scandal that we'll be covering tonight. Now, the census is taken every 10 years, and it determines how many congressional seats and electoral college votes each state receives. This is where the organization called Fair Representation in Redistricting comes into play. They're a front for the Arabella subcompany New Venture Fund. Now, the goal was couched as fair representation of underrepresented communities, but their true intention was to fund lobbying campaigns to block Republican lawmakers from basing district maps on the number of eligible voters and instead base it on the total population, non-citizens and illegal aliens included. This effectively dilutes the voice of the citizens, no matter their race or political affiliation. In 2015, an analysis by Real Clear Politics showed that a larger number of non-citizens increases the chance of a district electing a Democrat. In total, fair representation and redistricting targeted 14 states that are either battleground states or longtime Democrat targets, like Georgia, Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, you can see there, Wisconsin, and even Texas. Other states were targeted due to large minority populations, but not a single definitively blue state was targeted. So the organization behind this, Fair Representation and Redistricting, is a front for the New Venture Fund, and the New Venture Fund is a subcompany of Arabella Advisors. And this matters because in North Carolina, Democrats gained 2 congressional seats in 2022 because of the way that their Democrat Supreme Court redrew the district maps. Luckily, voters responded by booting the Democrat majority out of their state Supreme Court in the 2022 midterms. And in Michigan, Arabella's 1630 fund pumped $6 million into the campaign to have an independent commission redraw congressional maps in 2018, and this passed 61% to 39%. The final redrawn map here in Michigan cut down 2 guaranteed Republican seats, and in 2020, Democrats won 7 seats to the Republicans' 6. So these battles matter, and when dark money is swaying this type of gerrymandering, it needs to be talked about and it needs to be stopped. Also in 2020, the New Venture Fund provided nearly $25 million to Center for Technology and Civic Life, CTCL, which then passed $350 million to thousands of elections offices in the form of COVID-19 relief funds, even though less than 1% of the money was spent on actual protective equipment. Now, this money originated with Mark Zuckerberg. If you've been watching this channel for a long time, you might have heard of CTCL before. They came up in a Wisconsin ballot harvesting scheme where Zuckerberg's goons basically took over the elections process. Green Bay's Democrat mayor allowed Zuckerberg's grant team to take over the election logistics. And I know I said it at the beginning, but just a fair warning, this isn't a conspiracy or mere conjecture. This is proven. They were coordinating with the Wisconsin Five, the 5 largest cities in Wisconsin, and CTCL said that if these cities didn't spend the money as CTCL saw fit, they'd rescind the funding. This is where their funding of Michael Spitzer Rubenstein comes into play. And I'm not insinuating anything by this, but merely stating the facts. Spitzer Rubenstein was the state leader for election security for the National Vote at Home Institute, very left-wing, which just so happens to be the same organization that CTCL's founder and executive director is an advisor for. Spitzer Rubenstein was put in charge of correcting absentee ballots sent to the city clerk. And while city clerks are permitted to fix ballots, Spitzer Rubenstein was not, but he did anyway. He was also given the keys to the locked room where the ballots were stored, and CTCL's demands went beyond what the mayor and his team could legally comply with, but it didn't really matter. They went along with CTCL anyway. Now, leaked emails revealed Spitzer Rubenstein was given access to not only absentee ballots, but also voting machines and hidden internet networks where the votes were being counted. So one of Arabella's sub-companies is contributing massive amounts of anonymous money to a group, turning our elections dark, just like the money that they pass along. And like I said, again, for the 3rd time, maybe the 4th time, I'm not insinuating anything, but that's just the reality of the situation. Now, last September, so September 2023, the DC Attorney General opened an investigation into Arabella Advisors and the nonprofits that they control, some of which I haven't even mentioned yet, and he issued subpoenas for financial records to uncover potentially illegal political spending during and following the 2020 election. Part of this investigation was focused on New Venture Fund's relationship with Secure Democracy, a voting rights group that pushed for expansion of mail-in voting in 2020 and ran ads attacking multiple Republican senators. As exposed by Free Beacon, whistleblowers within Secure Democracy have suggested New Venture Fund illegally used charitable donation dollars and resources put towards Secure Democracy to attempt to influence Republican lawmakers and voters to support an expansion of mail-in voting. And if you have any reservations about believing that there was a well-funded cabal of powerful people who changed rules and laws, steered media coverage, and controlled the flow of information, just remember Time magazine admitted this, except they couched it as saving the election, saying their work touched every aspect of the election. At the risk of this article violating YouTube guidelines, I won't say anything more about it, but it's a real article linked below in my sources. It's long, but it's a worthwhile read, especially when you pair it with the research in this video. A lot of dots get connected. Now, the last thing to mention on this is that in October 2020, the Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry sued New Venture Fund and CTCL and the consulting firm that represented both organizations for injecting unregulated private funds into the Louisiana election system. The lawsuit was initially dismissed, but in 2022 it was reopened, and the Louisiana Supreme Court ruled 4-3 that the lawsuit could proceed. So, as you can see, Arabella is very politically active, but I'll let you be the judge on what you think of their actions. So just as with any big dark money activist organization, they're not satiated by merely controlling politics and culture from the outside. They plant people inside the highest political offices possible. And Arabella is no different. And this isn't anywhere near the end of exposing Arabella, but I think it's important to be clear on the kind of influence that they have over policy. The first person I'll be discussing is Paige Herwig. She was Biden's senior counsel until mid-2023, and she was tasked with leading the administration's judicial nominee vetting process. As you can see at the top of this article, Demand Justice was in big support of Biden choosing her. Why, you might ask? Because she used to work for Demand Justice. Demand Justice is funded in large part by the 1630 Fund, an investment arm of Arabella. They had not only tried to sink Brett Kavanaugh in 2018 by pumping $5 million into advertising against him, but they also went after Justice Stephen Breyer. Demand Justice drove a mobile billboard around the Supreme Court that said, "Breyer, retire. It's time for a black woman Supreme Court justice. There's no time to waste." And of course, it's a horribly racist and sexist thing to say, but in our modern culture, it's seen as acceptable. And it's actually pretty sad when you think about it that Demand Justice has influence over anything when they've so thoroughly polluted the definition of justice. But Demand Justice launched an ad for the Supreme Court vacancy, publishing a short list of candidates that they deemed suitable. Biden's choice of the now Justice Brown was not on that short list, but conveniently, there were 4 similarities between Biden's list and Demand Justice's list. And if I may, for a moment here, inject my own analysis, Demand Justice got exactly what they wanted without seeming too much like they were controlling the Biden administration. So whether you think that it was orchestrated to play out like this, or if it's just an appeasing pick on Biden's part, it can't be denied that Demand Justice has an influence over the Biden administration. And although Paige Herwig has since left her position as White House senior counsel, she got done exactly what Demand Justice wanted. She got a liberal black woman onto the Supreme Court. Another ex-Demand Justice employee in the Biden White House was Jen Psaki, Biden's press secretary until mid-2022. Psaki was Demand Justice's senior advisor before stepping into the Biden White House, and she had a very influential role, particularly when it came to censorship on social media and foreign policy. And this plays out well because Psaki was also a senior advisor to a firm called West Exec. And there have been more than 15 consultants from the firm that have spread throughout the White House during Biden's administration. And I won't go too long into West Exec because they're not the focus of this investigation, but they were started in 2017 by 2 former Obama administration officials, Tony Blinken, who later became and still is Biden's Secretary of State, and Michelle Flournoy. West Exec is registered as a strategic consultant firm instead of registering as a lobbying firm because it meant that they didn't have to disclose their clients and services, making it impossible to assess the influence that they have on federal expenditures and ultimately federal influence. So having these 2 key connections, Psaki was a no-brainer for the Biden White House. Now, the last person that I want to mention is Ron Klain. He was Biden's chief of staff until early 2023, serving on the administration's senior search team with Herwig. He also led the Center for American Progress Action Fund, or CAP Action for short, which received millions of dollars from the 1630 Fund in 2020. CAP Action was started in 2003 by John Podesta, George Soros, and a handful of other DC Democrats. They focus on placing people on Capitol Hill and within the media. They're the liberal heavyweights behind the left-wing blog Think Progress. So it makes sense to have a convergence of dark money networks and shady individuals like Podesta and Soros pushing the radical progressive agenda, trying to make it seem organic when it's anything but that. And that agenda has, to no surprise, sufficiently invaded the White House. One of the things that Arabella is infamous for are their fake pop-up groups. These are groups, often websites, designed to look like independent nonprofits that are really projects of dark money. Arabella has funded over 340 different pop-up projects targeting a range of issues including net neutrality, abortion access, Obamacare, Trump's judicial nominees, gender preferential health care, and a whole slew of liberal advertisements in 2018 and 2020. One such example is Courier Newsroom. This was started by Tara McGowan, who got her start on CBS. Courier Newsroom was originally owned by a group named Acronym, and Acronym received more than $8 million from Arabella. According to an internal memo, the goal of the Courier Newsroom is to create shareable and viral pseudo-news content to boost their preferred candidates, all of which are Democrats. Another one of Arabella's nonprofits, the Hopewell Fund, started a project called State's Newsroom, which ran many of these left-wing pop-up websites. State's Newsroom has since spun off as an independent nonprofit, but Open Secrets has revealed that they were given a $1 million donation from the Weiss Foundation, who I've already discussed. Hopewell also gave $1.72 million to News for Democracy, which Open Secrets points out was the centerpiece for a network of seemingly independent Facebook pages disguised as news outlets that started spending large amounts of money on digital ads in 2018. News for Democracy has also received considerable funding from the 1630 Fund. The focus of the Hopewell Fund is primarily social issues like abortion access. So just like Democrats were accusing Russians of spreading misinformation on Facebook in 2016, it seems that Democrats were doing the same exact thing, except they had way more money behind it, and there's no way to tell where the money came from. Things have a funny way of working, don't they? Back when Eric Kessler first started Arabella, he had called it an impact investing firm because their goal was to impact the political and cultural landscape. Needless to say, that's exactly what they've done with billions of dark dollars. Now, I've covered a fair amount of the causes that they've put their money behind, even showing the picture earlier detailing all of it. But the biggest nonprofits connected to Arabella are the New Venture Fund and the 1630 Fund. In November 2019, Politico called out the 1630 Fund for spending $140 million on the 2018 midterms. That money contributed to efforts ranging from fighting Brett Kavanaugh to boosting ballot measures to raise the minimum wage to changing voting laws and redistricting in several key states, as I've already discussed. They also received an anonymous donation of $51.7 million in 2018, more than the group had ever received in an entire year before Trump was elected. Another single anonymous donation was for $26.7 million. Luckily, Capital Research Center President Scott Walker identified the $26.7 million as coming from the New Venture Fund, confirming the 1630 Fund was part of the larger Arabella dark money network. Now, where that $26.7 million originally came from is another question, as is the $51.7 million. And 1630 has been called the indisputable heavyweight of Democratic dark money, because they funneled $61 million of untraceable money to progressive causes, making them the second largest super PAC donor in 2020. And we can see clearly that although 1630 was given the title of the indisputable heavyweight, that title is really held by Arabella. And New Venture Fund is the largest of Arabella's nonprofit network in total. But New Venture Fund sponsors the Media Democracy Fund, which is also supported heavily by Soros's Open Society Foundation. Their primary focus is on social, cultural, and environmental changes. The North Fund, another nonprofit within Arabella's network, is an umbrella group that sponsors several left-wing organizations focused on court packing, which is expanding the number of seats on the Supreme Court so Biden can sway the court to a Democrat majority. They also focus on abolishing the Electoral College, legalizing recreational marijuana, opposing the 22-week abortion ban, expanding Medicaid, and trying to make Washington, D.C. a state. Another Arabella nonprofit is called the Windward Fund, and their focus is on environmentalist groups. Then there's the Impetus Fund, the smallest and newest of Arabella's nonprofit network. They focus on voting rights, mail-in voting, and the Get Out the Vote campaign. And before I close here, let's show one more time the complete list of Arabella's political causes that they support with dark money. The encouragement is this: be bold. These agendas are being pushed by big dark money trying to get the public to believe that these political and social ideas are more widely accepted than they really are. Notice how every single issue that they support helps big government and helps big business. That's not a coincidence. If these ideas were truly organic, they wouldn't need billions of dark dollars to fund them. And I will go on any podcast and talk about these investigations. We need to spread the word about these groups so that people can see what they're doing and how big money is manipulating the social and cultural landscape to gaslight people into accepting these radical leftist policies. I will be posting up each individual segment of this video here over the next few days, so hopefully those videos will be more shareable for you. And if you ever think that sharing this content won't make a difference, remember that the Free Beacon published their own expose on this dark money network, and it led to the DC Attorney General issuing several subpoenas and opening an investigation. So send this to your representatives and state attorney generals too if you want. And if you do want to support this kind of journalism, you can visit our Patreon link down below. I thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day and God bless.